About Face just came out with new holographic eye paints, and I always get so excited whenever there's new, fun, and exciting makeup that comes to mainstream beauty. So I thought we could swatch them, try them on, and compare these a little bit to other holographic formulas out on the market. About Face just released 3 new shades in this line, and they previously had 7. And the new shades that they have definitely really appealed to me because the shades just felt a little bit more unique than the first launch, both in the shades and in the chrome shifts that they have. The first shade that we have is called I'm a Star, and I would describe this as an iridescent with a strong pink and a secondary yellow and orange shift. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that About Face has done an iridescent shade like this. When you look at these swatches up close, to me, it really does look like you get a holographic reflect in them. I didn't necessarily see that with the original set of shades that came out. And then for my look, what I did was I went in with this eye paint from Half Magic Beauty, and I just laid down a light blue base. And then I went in with I'm a Star on top. Because these eye paints have a sheer base, I think they work really well over other shadows. But I would recommend only using thin layers and not over blending. Otherwise, you do run the risk of having some patchiness or disturbing that first layer. And here's another lighting just so you can appreciate that orange and yellow flip a little bit better. The next shade that we have is called the Muse, and I would describe this as having a sort of grungy golden yellow base with an orange and a green flip. I really appreciate that we have fewer shades that seem overall like they're more unique. And then for my look, I wanted to see if I could bring out the yellow tones in this, so I paired it with this matte yellow eye paint from About Face. I let it dry down a little bit. I think if you let it dry down a little bit longer, it goes even better. And I think that if you're a fan of yellow eyeshadow, you're really going to appreciate and like this combination. And yellow eyeshadow, especially yellow eyeshadow that shows up on medium to deeper complexions, is hard to come by. And here's another lighting of the Muse just so that you can see that flip a little bit better. And then the third and final newer shade is called Little Twin. And at the time that I'm making this video, I actually showed some swatches on my Instagram and just tried to gauge an interest in what people's favorite shade was, and this came out on top. I can totally tell why. I mean, this is a really interesting shade. It has a kind of cool silvery pink purple base, and it has greenish and pink sparkles throughout, and it's got a blue flip to it. And then for my look with this shade, I went in with one of the eye paints from Violette FR. This is the kind of light lilac shade. I will have it linked below. And then I just went over top with this shade, Little Twin. It doesn't have the most intense multi-chrome shift, but it has a beautiful glow to it. And here is what Little Twin looks like swatched in another lighting. You can see that kind of blue-purple shift to it. Here is what those 3 shades look like swatched all together on my arm. All of my labels are from the wrist down, and as I said before, I think that these shades are really pretty and they're also quite unique, even for me as someone who has a lot of different chrome shadows in my collection. Just for the sake of comparison, I'm going to show you the older shades that I have in my collection. First, we have the shade Rebirth, and this is a very kind of bright, vibrant green toned shade, and it has different shades of green that it flips between, and it also has a gold flip. Next, we have the shade Serendipity, and this has more of a teal base with a deeper blue shift to it. You can tell that of these older shades, I was definitely drawn to the more green and blue toned ones. I also just want you to see when I swatch these that I'm not really seeing as much of like a sort of holographic reflect as I am in those newer shades. The last of the older shades that I have is called Inner World, and this one has more of a deep blue-green base with a strong purple shift. I also want to point out that, you know, for a lot of people that enjoy editorial makeup looks, I think having liquid shadows with those cool chrome flips is really important so you can do innovative graphic and editorial looks as well. And here's what close-up swatches of those 6 shades look like. As you can see, you definitely have lighter and more ethereal vibes than with some of the older original shades. And I believe that all of the older shades are still currently available as well. In the second part of this video, I wanted to share other brands that have holographic eyeshadows that I've tried. I'm also going to share demos as we go. The first brand I have to talk about is Touch of Glam Beauty. This is an independent brand based out of Los Angeles. They have some of the most intense holographic eyeshadows that I've ever tried. You are going to get the most magical holographic effect in sunlight or bright light, and that's just something you want to keep in mind when you're wearing them. First, we have Alien Holo, which has a grungy green base with a blue-purple shift. Touch of Glam Beauty has such a wide variety of holos that you're bound to find at least one shade that suits your preferences. And in this little demo here, I'm actually doing a try-on with Gargoyle Holo, which is one of my absolute favorite grungy green holos. This next shade I'm showing is also another favorite of mine. It's called Ghost Holo, and it's described as having a mint hollow base, and it shifts gold and baby blue. With some of these other brands I'm showing, you can really see those hollow specks quite a bit. And each of those hollow specks can basically capture the entire rainbow depending on what angle the light is hitting from. Next, we have the shade Pink Holo. This is an older shade in the line. It has a kind of deep pinky red base with a green blue shift. I think this is a very special shade, but I think that for all of these brands, the shades have just continued to get more and more spectacular over time. Next, we have the shade Purrrfect Holo, and this is another favorite of mine. It's described as having an eggplant base, and it's got a green and blue shift. You can see in my demo here just how intense that holo is in this shade, and it has a really pretty flip to it as well. I see this one continuing to be in my favorite holos from Touch of Glam for quite some time. Here's what the 4 shades I just talked about look like swatched all together on my arm. There's so many other shades I could have shown, talked about, and swatched, but I really just wanted to spotlight the Touch of Glam Beauty holographic formula because it truly is top of the line. The next brand I'm going to mention is one that I've talked about several times before. This is Crypine Cosmetics, which is a Chinese beauty brand that I've come to really know, love, and trust when it comes to constantly coming out with new and innovative formulas. First, we have the shade Daydream, and as the name implies, it's very light and ethereal holographic shadow. It has a light blue base and it shifts yellow and pink. These holos are also very intense, just like the Touch of Glam Beauty ones. One difference that I'd like to say between the two is that I feel like you get a little bit less of a gray base in these ones. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I think it has to do with the pigments. Next, we have the shade Serpent Holo, and this is a really kind of deep and grungy and moody holo. I don't have a demo with this specific shade, but I do have one with Solar Eclipse, which has a really kind of fiery shift to it. I love that with Crypine Cosmetics, you get the intense holo effect, but you also get such an intense multi-chrome shift. Next, we have the shade Cobra Holo, which is another really deep, grungy, moody toned holo. The tone of this one is just a little bit deeper than Serpent Holo. The 4th shade I'm going to show from Crypine Cosmetics is called Popping Candy, and similar to the Daydream shade that I showed first, it has a very light and ethereal base tone, and it shifts between green and pink and yellow. And here's what all 4 shades from Crypine Cosmetics that I just talked about look like swatched on my arm. If they're a brand that you haven't tried before, I highly recommend trying some of their formulas. The next brand that I briefly wanted to mention is Lethal Cosmetics because they recently came out with holographic eyeshadows. They are an EU-based brand. They're in Germany and they have some really nice eyeshadow formulas, and these holographic shadows are no exception. I believe that these are described as being metallic holographic shadows. Just like all the other shimmers from Lethal, the texture is very smooth. I think that a lot of people would get on well with this formula, and you can buy these as individual single shadows or as a bundle. All of these specific shades are named after different stones. This is the shade Zeolite, which is described as a multi-chrome holo that shifts turquoise, pink, and gold. Fluorite is also a light and ethereal toned holographic multi-chrome, and it's described as having a lavender, blue, and orange shift. Next, we have the shade Opal, and this shifts between blue, purple, and aqua. And in the demo that I'm showing in the right side of the screen, I believe that I'm using the shade Opal for my holographic effect here. The texture of this formula being so smooth really lends itself to precise placement. Next we have the shade Jade, which shifts green, silver, and pink. Next we have the shade Rhodinite, and this shifts magenta, orange, and gold. And just as a quick little comparison, I think the holo effect in these is intense, just not as intense as Crypine and Touch of Glam Beauty. I think the particles are maybe just a little bit smaller. And then the last holochrome from Lethal Cosmetics is Quartz, and this shifts coral, green, and gold. Here's what all 6 shades look like swatched on my arm. I really appreciate the fact that even though we only have 6 shades in this line, we get a very wide variety when it comes to base pigments and shifts. The next brand that I briefly want to touch on is Beaute Bar, and specifically their palettes, because a lot of their palettes actually do incorporate at least 1 or 2 holographic shades. Not all of them, but a lot of them. I'm holding the Morally Grey palette. This was a palette that came out around Valentine's of this year. I like this palette for a number of reasons. One, it's a concise color story. I really appreciate small palettes, especially small, concise color stories. And I think the combination of gray and pink is really flattering. This is the shade Not a Villain, and it basically is like a blackened charcoal, and it has holographic reflex throughout. Then we have the Poison Garden palette, which came out around fall time last year, so just about a year ago. It is such a beautiful, unique color story. I've definitely talked about this palette at least a few times before, and this one has several shades in it that are holographic, so I'm going to swatch those. Beaute Bar makes some really interesting holographic shades, so I always look forward to when they include them in the palettes. You don't have as much of that gray base as you do with some of the other brands that I've shown. It's just different. And I appreciate having different options, especially because not that many brands make holographic shadows. Some of my favorite holos from Beaute Bar are those really deep and grungy toned ones. And then the last palette and brand that I'm going to talk about is Floating Life, and this is from Cheeryep. And this was done in collaboration with Freya. I've had this palette for, I want to say, over a year at this point. It has this really beautiful holo. I would describe this one as a blackened red. This really does continue to be one of my favorite C Beauty palettes, even after all this time. And this holo in particular, it's just so good. So now that we've had a chance to talk about some new releases when it comes to holographic eyeshadows and a bunch of different formulas, I'm curious if you've tried any of these formulas or if you have any on your wish list. I think these new holographic eye paints from About Face are a lot of fun. Are they as intense and holographic as the shadows that I've tried from indie brands? No. But I do think they're pretty, and I love to see more fun and exciting makeup releases in mainstream beauty. Do you have any other holographic eyeshadow formulas that you'd recommend that I try? I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.